guys, welcome back to my channel. So today we are finally going to be discussing the book that I have been reading, it feels like forever, and talk about a little spoiler-free review. I will do a spoiler review on this soon, but I need some time to digest it, really get my thoughts around it. But that is for Joe Abercrombie's The Blade itself. So I'm really excited to talk about it. Let's get started. So The Blade itself is the first book in a trilogy by this Joe Abercrombie fella. I have never heard of him before until I read this book, and now I want to read all this stuff. Well, I definitely want to finish the series, and I'm very interested. He has a few other books. The Shattered Sea trilogy. I'm interested in anything this man writes because this was just so my style. So this is a fantasy series. It's pretty epic, sprawling, lots of different points of view. The thing that makes this book so special is the characters, because you're bouncing between I think maybe 5 different character point of views, and sometimes within the same chapter. So it's not like a George R.R. Martin situation where each character gets their own chapters. Sometimes you can be bouncing between 3 to 4 heads. They get a chapter break and then you're in a different point of view, or they get their own chapter, kind of depending. But what makes it so special is that these characters are so distinctive, and especially by the halfway point I could figure out whose head we were in without the book telling me, because from just the way they were written to like their internal thought process and the way they viewed the world, I could figure out usually within the first sentence, like, oh, we're in Glocta's point of view, oh, we're in Giselle's point of view. Because their voices are so distinct from each other. They are very colorful characters. They think differently from each other. They just see the world in such a different way, and it can be so fun in one chapter to see how these characters view each other, how they view the world. Oh, it's so fun. Although this book, I mean, you can kind of see from the cover, which I like so much. I love the like splattered ink, but there's kind of like a very violent vibe to it, and that's something I would say about the whole book, is that there's just always an air of violence. Even if there's not something violent going on at that moment, a lot of these characters have such a brutal or horrible past. There's just always that like edge or that undercurrent of something terrible is coming, and that it's building up to something really intense. That all being said, this book is hilarious. Actually hilarious. I mentioned in a vlog that may or may not be up yet. I was less than halfway through the book, and I mentioned like, oh yeah, it's kind of darkly funny, but I'm not laughing out loud. I'm more just like internally chuckling to myself, which was true. But once I hit about that halfway point, it was hilarious. I was actually laughing out loud, which I haven't done with a book for so long, and it was so consistently hilarious. Like there's just some characters, Giselle in particular, who nearly everything this guy said, and he's such an asshole, but it was so funny. And sometimes it's not even what the characters say, it will just be like the situations that they're in and the way it's written, like what's happening in and of itself is funny. Like like I said, in the same chapter it could bounce back and forth between different point of views, and that juxtaposition will be hilarious. It's so well done and so clever. I just loved the act of reading it, because there is action, there's some political intrigue, which is actually my least favorite part of the book, but there's more of that in the first third, I would say. There's magic, there's fantasy, although it's at the edges and it's not quite explained, and a lot of characters in the book don't believe it or don't understand it. And then there's also this humor. Even though there's a lot of heaviness with this story, there's also a lot of joy. It made for such a pleasant reading experience. I had no idea when looking at this that like, this would turn into like a, oh, I can't wait to read that so I can have a fun time kind of a thing, but it totally is. It's a fun action adventure fantasy mystery. I'm kind of mad at myself for not reading this book sooner. Seriously, I've had this book since it was actually a subscriber sent it to me, so thank you so much, you know who you are. And I've had it since end of December or early January, and I've always put it off because, like I said, I've never heard anything about it, and now I'm just like, I cannot wait to read more into this series. I will say, so it's a trilogy, and this isn't a bad thing, I'm just putting it out there. The climax of the book, it wasn't anticlimactic, but it definitely felt like, man, we are just getting started, basically. Like, oh, this is not the end. We have so much more to explore. I mean, it entices me to read more because it gives me that feeling like when the climax of the series happens, it's going to be insane. I can't even begin to imagine what the climax of the entire series is. Oh my God. So I might also grab the audiobook for book 2 because I also heard that the audiobook really plays up the humor and that might be enjoyable. So if you are looking for a new adult fantasy, or if you're just looking for a new book to read in general, or if you've heard of this book or this author and you're kind of on the edge on whether to dive into it or not, it is not like any fantasy I've ever read. And I have gotten nothing but pure, unadulterated enjoyment out of it. I am obsessed with this guy's writing style. I think this is something that I personally, as an aspiring fantasy author, want to emulate. It's concise. There's not purple prose, but it can be beautiful at times, and it's smart. There is just something where it's like you put real time and effort into the way you set up this book and these characters, because it just feels like somebody who is the master of their craft really put this book together. So highly recommend. I would love people to go out and get this. And although this book is amazing, this was also one where I could very easily picture as like an HBO series. It just had that vibe with all these different point of views, colorful characters, different locations. It was fun, it was funny, it was violent, and I hope there is one because I could totally just live in this world. It is such a blast, a brutal blast, but a blast. So that was my spoiler-free review for The Blade Itself by Joe Abercrombie. Like I said, I'm definitely going to come out with a more in-depth spoiler review because there's a lot of things I want to talk about, but I need a few days to think about it, maybe go on some like Reddit pages about it. But you can keep a lookout for that by subscribing to his channel so you don't miss out on anything like it in the future or any more bookish or writing related content. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you guys next time. Bye!